So let's look at that whole idea of oral sex in the first place. So what is the primary position? Because there's always going to be difference of opinion, but what is the primary position among the scholarship when it comes to oral sex, both cunnilingus and fellatio?
Okay, so cunnilingus, just for benefit of anyone listening who's not sure what, obviously, cunnilingus refers to oral stimulation of the female genitalia, and fellatio refers to oral stimulation of the male genitalia. Obviously, both of them are forms of oral sex, oral stimulation practices. Now, in terms of the Islamic position, there isn't any explicit
Are you serious? Just when we started talking about it.
Quranic authority from.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you back up just a teeny tiny bit because you stalled for a second.
Okay, so from cunnilingus, the definition of cunnilingus and fellatio.
No, from the Islamic. There's no specific. You said there's no specific.
There's no clear or explicit Quranic verse or hadith from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, which explicitly prohibits oral sex. And the Islamic legal maxim is that unless something, when it comes to ma'lumat, which is things that are not related to worship, everything is halal unless there's something which explicitly prohibits it. So everything is halal unless you find a clear version of Quran or hadith, or like the consensus of the scholars, which basically says that such a practice is haram, or to do something is haram. So because there isn't anything clearly which prohibits oral sex, both from the Quran or the hadith, or from the consensus of the scholars, therefore that's why Muslims are of the opinion that it's permissible. There are some Muslim scholars, like for example the Hanafis, who are of the opinion that oral sex is haram. And the reason why they say it's haram, or they say it's makruh, which is disliked, is because there's a hadith, but the hadith isn't sound, but I'm just going to explain their reasoning. There's a hadith when that Aisha is reported to have said that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, never looked at her genitalia out of shyness. So what they've taken from this hadith, but again, this hadith isn't sound, it's a weak hadith, but they've taken from this hadith to deduce that if the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, didn't look at Aisha's genitalia, of course, then by extension to even pleasure the genitalia with one's mouth, then it's haram. So that was their understanding. But again, that's not the majority of scholars, and even in that opinion, it's quite weak. But that's what some scholars have said, that's why it's haram, and some said it's makruh. Now you do find some scholars, even modern day scholars, who will say that although oral sex is not haram, it's disliked because it's the practice of the dogs, or it's the practice of people in the West, or it's the practice of people that have got no real haya, and what they've said is that the mouth is used to recite the Quran, to kiss your family, to kiss your children. Why would you use this apparatus to perform such a disgusting act? Again, I don't agree with that, but that's some of the views of some scholars, particularly of Asian origin and Arab origin. And when we're speaking about oral sex, and I think it's important that Muslims understand this, that sometimes when scholars are speaking, they're also speaking from their own cultural perspective or their practices. So they come from a background in which these practices is alien to them, and they might have heard that it's practiced in the West. Like there's some scholars who've said oral sex is just something which comes from the West, when in reality, and I've mentioned it in my book, there were a number of scholars from the 11th, 12th, 13th century who were speaking about oral sex and the pleasure that it gives both to the man and to the woman. So it isn't alien to Islam. But for whatever reason, in the last 100 years or so, there's a lot of Muslims, particularly from the Arab world and the Indian subcontinent, who look at oral sex as a despicable act. Although they say it's not haram, they say it's not becoming of a good or believing Muslim or a good believer. People have researched this or Googled this on the internet. You do find those comments by a lot of scholars and originally from the Indian subcontinent. So I think and again, they're mainly speaking from a cultural perspective, that maybe it's something that they don't do, or it's not a practice that is agreeable in their culture. But to say that it's haram, like Islamically, obviously you need clear evidence, either from the Quran or the Hadith, and there isn't any verse from the Quran or Hadith which actually explicitly prohibits oral sex. So obviously, by virtue of that, then the practice is halal. But again, it doesn't mean that the people have to do it. If someone wants to do it, it's up to them. If they don't want to do it, again, it's up to them. They've got the volition to pick whichever practice they want to do, obviously in the bedroom. But for some reason that is it's probably one of the most requested questions that I get asked on my Facebook page and the direct messages. Everyone wants to know like this practice, whether it's halal or haram. So again, it's important that we clarify from the Islamic perspective. There isn't anything which explicitly says it's haram, and if someone says it's haram, they need to bring evidence why it's haram. But then also the question is, there's some men who maybe want to perform this act or want to receive this act from their wife, but the wife, for every reason, doesn't feel comfortable giving it. Now, in those circumstances, again, it has to be that's something that's a mutual understanding. So a man can't demand this because it's halal and say you have to do this. And that's why, again, DJ Khaled's comments was very problematic, because it came across, and I'm giving the benefit of the doubt, and I don't think he meant it, but I think the way he said it was as if she has to give. I'm trying to give him benefit of the doubt, please. He came across as if it was a demand, when I think for him it was more of expectation, in a sense of, because
I'm sorry, I'm not giving it the benefit of the doubt. I would have if he had said, well, you still have to do it anyway. There's things that you have to do. Okay.
again,
You may not like it, but there are things that you have to do.
Yeah, I know, but again, it's a lot of bravado that men utter, particularly when they're in public platforms. So that's why I think when I watched it, even when I spoke to another of my friends, what they deduced from what he said wasn't a demand. It was just like an expectation.